All right. So again, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for attending the class, even though kadali ra kayo akong notice nga gihatag. So I've only informed you that we'll be having this class, I guess, a couple of hours ago. So thanks so much for attending this class. And then again, this is for those who just joined in. I just announced a while ago that every Tuesday would be the schedule for our classes, or at least the priority nga, schedule for our classes. Every Tuesday we will be meeting online. The reason why I decided to just keep on doing the online class, it's because I realized based on my previous experiences, based on our previous experiences, doing pre-recorded class is really not that effective. Bisa kung saon yun. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do an online class because anyway, almost all the other instructors does the same thing. But don't you worry, there might be some instances na we really have to do a pre-recorded class if medyo mabisi jud. Right now I'm currently studying, or currently taking the one of the last units of my master's degree, so medyo mabisi gamay. So there might be chance that I won't be able to conduct an online class. So if that's the case, I'm just going to upload a pre-recorded class instead. Okay, but again, um, we will schedule every Tuesday to be our schedule for kuan atong klase online. Same link. The link will never be changed. We'll keep on using the same link until pwede siyang gagamiton. And that way di na ta maglibog unsa nga link atong gamiton. And then again, if na mga problema, that's the time that if na mga problema, I'll inform you so that we can either move it to a different schedule. Just like this week, supposedly I will meet you on or I'll meet you last Tuesday. However, I was asked to prepare for the live broadcast of yesterday's orientation. So it took me the whole day to prepare it because ginan lang ko anang Tuesday na pod. So gidadali gama, and then mutong wala ko ka klase. All of my classes were postponed, and that includes our class today. So again, every Tuesday, Monday would be my kuan. Monday ako na siyang igahin sa mga first years, and then Tuesday would be for web development, and then Wednesday would be for our animation. Katong mga under animation. So wala pa na ako na wapa ko ka sugod gani klase. So let's start. For those who are under me with animation, we will start our classes. Siguro I'll try tomorrow, but I don't think I can prepare. I'll have enough time to prepare. So I guess we'll do it next week. Okay? For animation. All right, so again, welcome to our very first lesson regarding Web Development 1. And for our first lesson, we'll be talking about the World Wide Web Part 1. So it says here Part 1 because this lesson is so broad, we need to take it into two, or we need to break it into two separate classes or separate lessons. So this is ITS 300 Web Development 1. My name is Julius, your instructor. Be sure to try to keep up with the lessons, try to take notes. Right after this class, there will be learning assessment and assignment that will be posted later on. So if you have any questions or clarifications regarding today's lesson, you can share it with the class right after. You can share it with the class by the end, at the end. So okay, so let's have a review. Previously, on our previous meeting, we've discussed about basically it was our course orientation. We've talked about the online and modular learning. We've talked about the different learning management systems that we'll be using. So we have Google Classroom, and then the Google Classroom will be supported with YouTube and Facebook. Okay, YouTube for the replays of our online lectures and pre-recorded classes, and then Facebook would be for announcement, Facebook and Facebook messengers. And of course, we talked about our course summary and class arrangements, and then the course requirements and the student directory. By the way, have you taken the student directory already?
Yes, sir.
Okay, for
Yes,
those
sir.
who
Yes,
are,
sir.
okay, thank you.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
All right, thank you. Open ako na check. I'll check it siguro by the end of this week. And then of course, I've asked you to install the tools for web development. Have you done it so? Na-install na ba ninyo to akong mga gi-ask na install ninyo sa inyong phone or sa inyong PC?
Not yet, sir.
Wala pa, sir.
Okay, try. Okay, so if that's the case, please try to install it now. Mintras
Jud,
na ako.
sir.
Mintras, kuan pa ba, napay-space inyong mga phone. What if puhon mapuno na? Di na ma-installan. Okay? But anyway, before we proceed, we'll have to review our previous assessment. So this is to check whether or not we are kuan, ready na batang to proceed to our next lesson. So I have here the assessment. So we'll try to answer it, and then let's see if maybe um, again we are ready for our next lesson. Hold on, let me open it up real quick. Okay, so let's see what are the online learning management systems. Okay, we are going to use for the course this semester. Asa siguro ang answer? Dari di ay. Wala ako na share. Hold on. Okay, again, what are the online learning management systems we are going to use for our course this semester?
Google Classroom,
YouTube and Facebook Messenger.
YouTube.
Okay, all right. So we have Google Classroom, YouTube, and Facebook Messenger. So actually, the only learning management systems here is the Google Classroom. Okay. However, since we'll be using both the Facebook and YouTube, so we're just going to consider them um, learning management system as well because it's gonna be a platform that supports that supports our learning management. All right. So if you've answered Facebook Messenger, Google Classroom, and YouTube, then that's correct. So I'm not sure if you already know this, but usually whenever you kana maka try mo ginani nga let's say quiz, 'di ba? Usually whenever you encounter these type of quiz, you'll see kanan namin mga multiple selections. Usually the numbers of our correct answer will be represented here. So since it says here 3 points, then the answer must be tulo ka buok. Kabalo naman na.
Na, sir.
Okay. All right. So next time when we'll be having a quiz, at least sa ako ang mga quizzes, akong mga assessments, whenever you see 3 points right here and the mode of selections kana multiple answers, then you meaning the numbers of points here represents the number of selections that you should choose. Okay, so that's it. Right, let's proceed. It is a software application or web-based technology that is used to plan, implement, and assess a specific learning process.
Learning
Learning
management
management
system.
system.
Okay, that's correct. All right, so learning management system. And select which LMS we are going to use for projects and assignments. Which of the two?
Google
Google
Classroom.
Classroom.
Google Classroom. Okay, again, we'll be using Google Classroom for projects and assignments. And basically, we tried in Moodle last time, pero wala siya nagamit. It's because for quizzes, we'll be using, which platform we are going to use for quizzes?
Google Form.
Google Form. Okay.
Form.
Which of the following are the application we will use for web development using Android phones?
Web edit o offline browser sir.
Okay, all right. So that's right. So again, this is the application that you have to install on your phone. This will allow us to create HTML files. All right, and then offline browser. The reason why I ask you to install offline browser is because the regular browsers that we have in our mobile phones like Chrome or Opera cannot dili niya i-render ang HTML. So whenever dili niya i-render ang HTML as a web page. So usually whenever we try to run an HTML file using Chrome, it will only display the HTML codes. Dili niya i-render into an actual page. So that's why you have to install an offline browser. And then, which of the following is the application we will use for web development using desktop or laptop computers?
Notepad or Sublime.
Okay. All right. So basically, it would be any text editing software, but I would suggest to install Notepad++ and Sublime because they are specifically designed for coding. Okay, naa siya mga color depending on the type of code that you're going to enter. So it will help a lot when it comes to web development or hard coding. So aside from the Notepad++ and the Sublime, Of course, we'll be needing a web browser, but I guess usually web browsers already pre-installed on our devices, so we don't necessarily have to worry about that. But just in case wala kay Chrome, try to install Chrome, because like I said before, Chrome is one or maybe the most commonly used web browser in the world. So we'll be using Chrome for our browser. And then, what is the equivalent grade for major examinations?
30%.
Okay, that's right. 30%. That is for your midterms and finals. All right, so let's check your progress. If are we ready for the Are we ready for the next topic? Yes, it is. It says here the average is 8.5 over 10, so that means we are ready for our next lesson. So the next lesson will be about the World Wide Web. Okay, so today we'll be talking about the World Wide Web, particularly the internet and the World Wide Web. We are going to differentiate the difference between, or we're going to understand the difference between the internet and the World Wide Web, and then we'll be talking about the classification of websites, and let's have an overview on how the web works. So for this part, the how the web works part will be discussed thoroughly because this is a broad discussion. We'll discuss this in our next lesson, but for the meantime, we are going to have an overview, understanding on how the web works. And that way, we will be ready for the next lesson, which is the in-depth or a thorough discussion about how the web works. Okay, so let's start. Imagine you are going to look up for the best build for a hero on your favorite mobile game on the internet. Okay, so the reason why ako nagibutan because I suck at gaming. Okay, I'm not really good in gaming, especially the MOBA kind. All right, so most of the time, if na ako'y when I katong last year when I'm still playing kanang Mobile Legend, okay, I've quit playing it because I'm not really good. But most of the time, whenever I am interested on a hero, I do a research. Ganaan ko mabalan sa nindot nga build. So I'm not sure if that's the same case with you guys, katong mga gamer diha. But this is how I do it. Okay, but I wala akong nidula na ron. Anyway, so imagine this, and just about any activities that you're doing online. All right. So for example, you're going to research for an assignment. So si sir or si ma'am required you to do an assignment or to do a research. Okay. So what website are you going to visit? Diba? How long will it take for you to see the result? Diba? The moment that you enter the URL, for example, you wanted to enter google.com. So how long will it take for you to get the result you want? And then were you able to get the result that you want? Diba? It's so frustrating that sometimes we are trying to search for, let's say, a certain topic, and then dili kita sa right nga topic, dili ta kita sa right nga response. Okay, so frustrating. But were you able to get the result that you want? If so, how does the internet provide you with the result? What are the processes involved? What are the processes behind how it works? So for this topic, we're going to understand how exactly the internet works or the World Wide Web works. The moment that we enter the URL on the website that we're trying to visit, up until the time that we see the result on our screen. Diba? Sometimes, especially if the internet is so slow, usually it will take forever for us to get the result. Sa google.com lang, maabot og pila ka kung ano sa ma-receive na to ang result. That is because maybe we are located on an area that has very slow internet connectivity, or maybe hinera jud ang atong phone, diba? There are lots of reasons, and then today we're going to have an overview on how exactly the internet works, or the World Wide Web rather works. Okay, so whenever we talked about web development, being that is the main purpose of this course, web development. That is our course description, diba? So before we start developing a website, we'll have to understand first what exactly is the World Wide Web, how it works, kumbaga ila-ilahon sa nato sa World Wide Web before we can make websites for it. Okay? So again, for our very first topic, we'll talk about the World Wide Web. We use it almost every day for doing our research, communicating with our friends and families, watching our favorite videos, streaming our favorite movies, and many more. To many, the World Wide Web has been a favorite place to hang out during our free hours. But how exactly the World Wide Web works? What are the sequences of activities being done the moment we enter the website address and get the result that we want? Okay, so do we agree on this? That sometimes we use the World Wide Web almost every day, di ba?
Yes, sir.
Okay, like Facebook, di ba?
Yes, sir.
Kinsa gud dili makumpleto ang adlaw dili ka browse sa Facebook, sa Instagram or TikTok, all right? Basically, right now, especially us, kita mga sa atong time karon, we often rely our entertainment through the World Wide Web, through the internet, di ba? So, I guess us, since we are information technology students, we are ought to understand how exactly the World Wide Web works, and that is our main goal for this course, for this lesson. Okay, so next, hold on. Okay, another term that will come up in our mind when we talk about the World Wide Web is the internet. In fact, one of the confusion in the field of computer science and information technology is the difference between the internet and the World Wide Web. When do we say, or when do we use the term internet, or when do we say the World Wide Web, di ba? Sometimes we say, i-research na to sa internet, or i-research na to sa World Wide Web. So which is which? Nasa dapat? So we will proceed with our lesson with the understanding the difference between the internet and the World Wide Web. So if you're having that kind of scenario nga maglibog ka kung saan gamit ito, say difference gid sa internet and World Wide Web, let's put a stop to it right now. Okay, so let's talk about the internet first. The internet is a term used to refer to the massive network of millions of computers around the globe. These are the computers that are connected using different networking medium to share and receive data. So basically, internet is a connection of computers, millions of computers around the globe that is used to receive and share data or transmit data. So think about when two computers are connected to each other, that is already a network, computer network, di ba? So again, if two computers are connected to each other, and the main purpose that basically ang reason nga nung gi-connect sila is for them to be able to communicate and transmit data, so then we already have a computer network. Okay, so what are the computer networks, man? Asa mo nakita og mga computer networks usually? Asa nato makita usually mga computer networks? Anybody give an example? Dahan, wala? Napabitaw?
Yes, sir.
Okay, when do we usually see a computer network? Kamo. Example daw.
PC, sir.
Ha? Ha?
PC.
O gani, PC. Okay, when asa
Internet
mata?
cafe, sir.
Karon, internet cafe. Okay? So the internet cafe usually they're an example of a computer network. Multiple computers being connected to each other. That is to transmit and receive data, di ba? Usually internet cafe na sila server. Ang moingon ra ka nga PC1 usa ka oras and then ara siya ibuhaton sa iyong computer sa server and then it will grant 1 hour of usage for that particular PC. So that is already a transmission of data. So transmission of data. So that is computer network. Actually, if two computers are connected to each other, then that we already have a computer network. However, if we're going to add millions of computers that are connected together, that is the internet. So the internet refers to the connection between the millions of computers. So for example, if akong computer ron, since it's connected to millions of computers out there, then that is through the use of internet. Diba? The connection between my computer and the connection of my computer and the other computers around the globe is connected to an internet. Okay, so these are the computers that are connected using different networking medium to share and receive data. When say networking medium or network media, that includes wireless like Wi-Fi, okay, DSL, LAN, so on and so forth. The World Wide Web, however, is a way of transmitting data over the internet. So going back, if the internet is the connection or the connection of millions of computers that are transmitting data, the World Wide Web is just a way of transmitting the data. So this is through the use of Hypertext Transfer Protocol or HTTP and Hypertext Markup Language or HTML. So to fully understand the difference between the internet and the World Wide Web, let's think about this illustration that we have here. So imagine you are being invited to your friend's house for a dinner or a sleepover or dinner na lang. Okay, so go to a birthday sa imong friend and he or she wanted you to visit to kuan, mo visit silang balay so that you to celebrate his or her birthday. Okay? So imagine this is your house and this is your friend's house. So how are you going to visit your friend's house? Unsaon nimo nga maka-travel ka to your friend's house? Okay, for you to be able sakyanan ni nana, diba? Okay. So for us to be able to travel to our friend's house, we need to establish a couple of things. First is there must be any way that will allow you to kuan, a way of for you to be able to kuan, travel from your house to your friend's house. Okay? So for example, a road. Okay? So for example, if imong balay dili siya connected to anything like a road or something like that, dili nimo siya matultulan, di ba? So again, one of the first things that we're going to establish is there must be a road or a way that in any way connects your friend's house to your house. Okay? So now na natay dalan, the next thing that we're going to do is the next thing that we're going to do is how are we going to do the transportation. So if your friend's house leaves just a couple of perhaps dool ra siya kaayo, then you can either walk or if you have a skateboard, you can skate your way to your friend's house. Now, if your friend lives, let's say, a couple of streets away or a couple blocks away, then if you have a bike or motorcycle, then you can pedal your way to your friend's house. Diba? However, if your friend's house lives perhaps, maybe if your friend lives a few towns away, or maybe taga-Bais siya, at taga-Bais ka na yung friend taga Dumaguete, then you can either ride a bus or any vehicle and then ride your way to your friend's house. Okay. The difference between the World Wide Web, and the internet is comparable to your friend's house and to your house. Okay. So basically, your house and your friend's house can be compared to computers. So again, when two computers are already connected to each other, then that is called a computer network. Diba? However, if we're going to add millions of these computers, then we have the internet. So the connection between the multiple computers or millions of computers are internet. Now, the World Wide Web can be compared to the way that you're going to travel from your house to your friend's house. So for example, for the two computers to be able to communicate with each other, it uses World Wide Web, for example, to receive or to send and to send and receive HTTP requests. So when we say HTTP request, kana na mag usual natong buhaton sa internet, like if we're going to visit facebook.com, for us to visit facebook.com, we need to enter www.facebook.com in our browsers, diba? So the moment that you click enter, after you entered www.facebook.com, your browser already initiated or your computer already initiated an HTTP request. So it will send the data to the computer or to the server where the www.facebook.com is located, and then the server will where the facebook.com is located will send you back its content. Murabag pag request nimo sa facebook.com, pag abot sa Facebook nga server, iyang isend balik nimo ang iyang request. Alright, so that is an HTTP request. That is through the use of the World Wide Web. Another example is email. So for example, you wanted to send an email to a friend or perhaps a registrar because wala pa nimo na receive ang imong load slip. Okay, so you send them an email to request for your load slip. So the moment that you send the email, you've already that is a data being transmitted through the use of the World Wide Web. Okay, another thing is if maybe you're into Twitter or maybe your Facebook likes, diba? So that is a transmission of data through the use of the World Wide Web. Okay? So nagets ra ba ang difference between the internet and World Wide Web?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so basically again, let's ato ning klaroon, the internet is just the connection between millions of computers that are connected together and that transmits data. And the World Wide Web is just a way of transmitting the data, a way that the computer will be able to transmit data to another computer. Okay. Anyway, we'll talk more about it in our next lesson. So another thing that we tend to we tend to talk about when we tend to kind of maagyan na to when we talk about web development is or are the websites. Okay. After all, websites makes up the World Wide Web. Okay, so a website is a collection of web pages that constitutes the World Wide Web and published on a web server. Websites are usually used as an effective medium in sharing information and serving the purpose for any organization. So can we all agree on this? The websites now are usually used as an effective medium in sharing
Yes, sir.
information. Okay? So one of the disadvantage of using websites to share information is the fake news, di ba? Because right now, kitang labi na atong mga kita ron, we tend to rely more into the what we see in the internet rather than what we see in the TV or televisions or what we heard on the radio, di ba? Dili na kayo siya uso para nato. That's why we tend to rely more on the information that we got on the websites or the internet, right? So again, now websites are usually used an effective medium in sharing information. So whenever muto taog fake news, so that just proves this theory right here that website is usually an effective medium. Okay. So again, going back, website is a collection of web pages. So you cannot call a website if it only has one web page. Okay, so a website can be called a website if it has more than one web pages on it. Collection of web pages, kumbaga. Alright, so websites can be classified into two. So we have static websites and dynamic websites. Okay. Static websites contain non-interactive and fixed contents. Users can only read and view its content without performing any other activities. Static websites are mostly developed using only hypertext markup language and cascading style sheets. Nakabantay ba mo ginani mga website kana mga static websites? It says here it contains non-interactive and fixed contents. Have you experienced or have you encountered non-interactive websites? Kana wala kailang buhaton but just to view and read.
Yes, sir.
Unsa man nga website man?
Articles,
Sir.
Hmm? Napilain?
websites na mo endorse og articles, sir.
Mo endorse?
Ay ning murag mo post sila ba orag mga
So imong wala kailang mabuhat but just to read. But can you
oh,
Ng mga
can
vlog,
you
sir.
I
Vlog.
think maka-comment man ka sa articles.
naiuban nga maka-comment, naiuban nga wala. Okay, so those are examples. So if kanang the moment that you enter a website's address, pag visit nimo is what you kailang mabuhat, igud you can read. Okay, so that is called static website. So meaning you cannot do anything else rather than just reading and viewing its content. Okay? So right now, I don't think uso pa na siya kaayo because it's very easy to create websites nowadays. So there's really no need to create static websites. But siguro a few years ago, there are lots of static websites we can find in the internet. But siguro right now dili na kaayo. But if you for some reason you encounter websites that are wala sila yung mabuhat but just to display the content and all you need to do is just read it, dili ka ka-comment, dili ka ka-like, dili nimo ma-share, inana, so that is a static website. Usually they are created using HTML and CSS only. So meaning it's only being structured using HTML and gidesign na lang siya og CSS. There are no other functionalities. The dynamic websites, however, these are the most common websites that we can usually see over the internet. It can perform complex functionalities and returns data based on the user's preference. Dynamic websites are interactive. Users can manipulate the website to produce the desired content. So when you say dynamic websites, these are the websites that has functionalities. Okay, so example, Facebook. All right, what are the functionalities of Facebook?
Chat.
Share.
Maka-post ka, sir. Maka-like, reacts ka.
Okay, all right.
Maka-interact ka lang sa ako.
Okay, that's right. So perhaps the most common is you can post, diba? You can share, let's say, you can share any web contents, let's say your day, imo have favorite food, so you can share whatever it is that you want to share. So that is one of its functionality. You can react, you can comment, you can share. So paman, you can katong maka-chat ka sa mga friend, maka-video call ka. There are maybe hundreds of functionalities websites Facebook offers. So that is an example of a dynamic website. And it says here that returns data based on the user's preference. So for example, if I'm going to open up my Facebook account here, is it going to be the same content that you will see if you open up your Facebook on your own? Same ba taog content na makita?
No, sir.
No.
Dili,
no.
sir.
Dili sa. It's because basically what the contents that I'll find in my Facebook are based on my preference. O kinsa ako mga friends, diba? O kinsa ako mga gina-follow, diba? So since we have different things that different people that we laylay ato ang gina-follow, laylay ato mga friends, that's why we have different data nga itong ma-display sa ato ang screen. Same thing with YouTube. If I'm going to open up my YouTube here, if I'm going to open up YouTube in my browser, it's not going to be the same. The contents will not be the same if you're going to open it on your own. It's because we have different preference. Diba? So that is called dynamic website. So basically any websites that has different functionalities, and one of its characteristics is that it will return different data based on our preference. Excuse me. All right. So another perhaps illustration or another explanation or another example of a dynamic website is, or one of the very good example of a dynamic website is kanang mga booking systems or ticket booking websites kumbaga. So this is just an example. So for how are you going to book an airplane ticket? So for example, in this, you have to enter your personal information, your destination, and then the number of days that you're going to stay. Okay, so before the total amount will be computed, you have to fill out the necessary information. Perhaps you can select the additional amenities or more, and then that's the time that you'll get the total amount, depending on the data or depending on the preference that you set. Okay, so once the total amount is being given to you, and then if you are ganahan ba ka na, then that's the time that your ticket will be booked. All right, so that is an example of, or one of the characteristics of a dynamic website. Now, this type of interactivity is not available on static website. Again, static websites, the only thing that it can do is just to show you or display for you to read it or view it. There are no other functionalities that you can do. Okay, so let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages of these types of websites. So let's start with the advantage of a static website. Static websites are easier to develop. Does not require advanced web development skills like server-side scripting. So what does it mean? Ano kunong ang static website is easier to develop? Why do you think that is the case? Can anybody try to explain? It says here, static websites daw are easier to develop. Why do you think that is true?
Kay kanang wala man siya mga functionalities, sir. So wala ra kaayo kay kanang ibutang gani nga mga
Okay, that's true. That's true. So since you're just developing a static website, again, going back, static websites are mostly developed using HTML and CSS only. So you don't necessarily have to add any functionalities to it, which is very much easy, or it's easier compared to actually putting functionalities to it. So if we're going to talk about the web development lifecycle, we're just on the designing phase, di ba? planning, and then sa designing ratako to. Wala na ta ni develop or add functionalities to it. That's why it makes it easier to develop. And another thing is it's cheap to develop. No need to hire an advanced web developer. Okay, so this advantage still falls back to the first one, which is being easy to develop. It also means it's cheap to develop because again, if ikaw lang, you have basic knowledge with HTML and CSS, then you can build static website on your own. You don't have to hire. If you don't know any programming languages or web development languages, then you don't have to worry because um, you don't necessarily need those because you only be needing HTML. So that's why it's cheap to develop because if you're not web developer, if you are not a web developer, then you don't have to hire someone to do the website for you, diba? And then the next advantage, it says here, it's cheap to host. No additional feature means no additional cost. So, uy, tayo sa ano na ko background. Okay, so when we say hosting, basically, whenever you're done with your website, the next thing that you're going to do is to, for example, now development needed. The next thing that you're going to do, if you're going to deploy it to the internet, in that way, ma-access na yung website through the internet, then that is called hosting, right? So static websites are much easier to host because first, it doesn't have any other functionalities like database or email, something like that. It will not handle credit card information. So therefore, it is much cheaper because you don't have to pay for database, email services, or credit card security or something like that, right? So that's why it's cheap to host. And another advantage is updating the content is more complicated. Alright, disadvantage today. Okay, so that what na siya advantage of a static website, and these are the disadvantages of a static website. Updating the content is more complicated. Updating the contents need to be manually structured. Why do you think that's the case? Why do you think that's true? Updating a static website content is much complicated. Anybody?
Sir, pardon, sir.
Why is it that updating the content is more complicated for static websites? Why do you think that's true? Anybody? If gibutang gaina nga easy to develop, if easy to develop ang static website, why is it that updating the content is complicated? Is more complicated than a dynamic website? Ano siguro? Can anybody give me an answer for that?
Sir, you mean, sir, ang host ang kanang maglisod siya og update, sir, or ang kuan ang viewers na
Hindi, siguro
ang
ang
host
developer,
mismo.
ang developer.
Ang developer.
Okay, ang developer siguro or host kana sakto na mogingon. Why is this case true? Ano may tinuod ni nga updating the content is more complicated for a static website?
Wala may idea, sir.
Anybody? Basig na ilang na idea mo ba? Diba, gaina sa one of its advantage is it's easy to develop. How come na complicated siya updating the content? Okay, think of it, for example, naay usa ka static website or you created a static website which is, kumbaga, murabag imong online profile ba? Let's say, a resume, an online resume. So basically, you created a website which is an online resume. Diba? You have your name, your contact information, so on and so forth. So it's a static because there's no other functionality in it, but you just want people to see your information. Diba? Resume ra gud siya. There are no other functionalities that will be necessary. So, however, ni-graduate na ka, nakabutang dito sa imong educational background is currently studying BS Information Technology 2018 to present. Okay, 2018 to present. And then, siguro, butang nato na, ni-graduate na daw mo. and you wanted to change it instead of to present himo na nimong graduated 2021, di ba? So since this is a static website, since this is a static website that is being that uses HTML and CSS, for you to change from katong present ga word to 2021 graduated, you have to change it with its code, di ba? You have to hard code it. Imo siyang
Dili
usbon,
ma-update, sir.
di mo siya ma-update. The only way that you can update it is through changing its code, di ba? Usbon nimo ang iyahang taysa nagubak na headset. Wait sa. Okay, again, for you to change anything on your koan, on your static website, you need to change it through its code. Imong gubaon ang imong code. So that's the reason why it's more complicated, because if you are not, if dili ikaw ang nigama, if gamay ra imong knowledge about the codes and you have to change something to it, that's why it makes it complicated. Unlike if it's gonna be a dynamic website, for example, if dynamic website, let's say Facebook, ganahan kang i-change mo imong name sa Facebook. You don't have to change your name through the Facebook source code, di ba? Dili maka mag-coding sa Facebook. There are already options provided by Facebook that will allow you to change your name, your relationship status, di ba? If gikan kang kabulag from in relationship to single, di ba? You don't have to do it using the codes. You just have to go to the settings because Facebook already provided us with the option for us to change it ourselves. So that's why updating the content on a static website is complicated because you have to do it using the code. Nagets ra?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
It makes sense mo po siya, di ba? So for you to change anything on a static website, you have to change the codes. All right. Unlike if it's dynamic, let's say again Facebook, if you wanted to change anything on your Facebook account, then it's already in the settings. Okay, so another disadvantage is site is not as useful. Site is only as good as reading and viewing. So I guess this is very understandable if that's the right term. So since you can't do anything on a static website rather than just reading and viewing, then it's not very useful at all, right? And then it's not suitable for long run. Okay, so since it doesn't have any functionalities, then it's not suitable for long run. Maybe it's only significant for a certain amount of time, di ba? Ganan kang pitan apply ka og work, and right now kuan man taron kanang kadalasan sa mga trabaho ron is remote. So the manager or the HR ask you for your resume, and ganan siya resume kanang i-build mo as website. Okay, so siguro relevant ra atong website niyo gigama anang adlaw, but in the following years it's no longer relevant. Diba? So it's not suitable for long run. So that is the disadvantages of a static website. Now let's talk about the advantages of a dynamic website. One is obviously interactivity. It offers additional functions in customizing the contents based on the user's preference. So basically, again, dynamic websites are known for its interactivity. So the users can interact with the website itself. Going back to our example a while ago, like Facebook, YouTube, ganahan kang mo play of something that will relax your mind, and you just have to search for it and then play. So there's an interaction between the website and you. So that is one of the advantage of a dynamic website is it allows the users interactivity. Second is it's easy to update. So kaina, we talked about one of the disadvantage of static website is its complication when it comes to updating the content. For dynamic websites, it's easy to update. Most dynamic websites are built with unique functionality that allows content to be updated manually. Okay, again, katong example na to gaina, if you wanted to change your relationship status on Facebook or maybe change your name on Facebook, then you don't have to write it on the code. It's already at the settings. Not just the settings, because Facebook already provided us with the option to change it ourselves. So it's easy for us to update any contents using dynamic websites. Alright, and then, naguba na po akong mouse. Okay, another advantage is its responsiveness. Responsiveness meaning its ability to adapt to different screen sizes and resolution. So when you talk about website responsiveness, again, it talks about the ability to adapt different screen sizes and resolutions. For example, have you noticed that Facebook looks different if you're using desktop compared to if you're using mobile devices like phones?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So that is called what responsiveness, diba? So dynamic websites are usually built with responsiveness in hand, ready. I mean, so think of these, Koan. Think of these advantages that we just created, that we just talked about, because maybe not this semester, but next semester, if I'm still be your instructor, we'll be creating dynamic websites. So if ever we'll be creating dynamic websites, we have to think about its interactivity. It must be easy to update, and then it must be responsive, and lastly, easy navigation. Users can easily transfer from one page to another. Let's say again, balik kita sa atong example Facebook, you are currently kuan na naka sa imong timeline, di ba? Imong gi-scroll mong timeline, and then there's one kuan na ini add sana ni friend requests, okay? So to know more about that person who just added you as a friend, you can just click the profile, and then you're already on his or her profile. So the navigation is easy. Kumbaga, you're able to transfer from one page to another. So that is an advantage of dynamic website. So although dynamic websites looks very good, or about sounds very good, diba? There are also it also has it also have its own disadvantages. So first, it's expensive. Okay, it is expensive when hosting. Kung mag-host na lang. Another thing why it is expensive, because if dili ka kabalong mo develop, or you don't know any web development languages, then you'll have to hire somebody to do to build the dynamic website for you. So that is an expense. Another thing is hosting it. So features like database, email services, and any other functionalities usually cost more when you are paying for its hosting services, diba? So anyway, maybe we can experience that hopefully next semester when we are already on our web development too. Dili ko ka-promise niyo na, because maybe we're still on online classes or work from home basis nga klase. But if dili na gani, we will try to kuan. If makaya nato, we will try to host our website. Di ba? Mo build dag atong website, dynamic website, I mean, then we are going to host it so that you'll experience the hosting. And then medyo expensive siya. Anyway, tabangan lang nato po. If mabalik na ta dire. Then slow processing. So web servers will require additional processes to render the scripts, etc. So this is just a matter of internet connectivity. So sometimes, I'm not sure if you have experienced it, but there might be some times nga naiuban nga mga websites nga dugay kay mo load if hina yung internet, naiuban nga website nga pas-pas. Okay? Because of the web browser or the web server may take more time to render the scripts. Anyway, we'll talk more about rendering the scripts in our next lesson. All right, so far, do you have any questions with the websites? No, na may mga questions so far?
None, sir.
Okay. Right. So it's already for, again, would you, okay lang ba nga ma-extend tagamay ha? Para mo
Okay,
manata.
go
Yes,
ahead,
sir.
sir. Okay, sir.
Okay lang, sir.
Haran din nato balik ugma. Haran din nato balik ugma, because section A a while ago, we had to cut it. We have to cut it because na may klase ni Sir Yeye. So right now, since bakante po sad ko, so we'll just continue that way. We don't have to go back. We don't have to come back tomorrow. So for section A, mubalik may klase ugma para tiwasan namo. This is where we ended with section A. Okay,
Sir,
so
excuse me, pwede mo
Chaman.
Section 8 ko niya. Example, sir, kung mahuman na ron, sir, dili ako mo join ugma.
Okay lang.
Okay, sir.
Inform lang ko tomorrow. Okay. All right, so let's proceed. So this time we are going to again, this is we're going to discuss about how the web works in full details on our next lesson, but this time it's just going to be an overview. Kumbaga, this is just an overview so that we will be ready on understanding how the web works in full details. So, okay, so this is an understanding. Why is it that sometimes it will take a little while for us to, or what are the processes involved whenever we enter a URL in our browser? Diba? For example, mo visit ta og facebook.com. The moment that we type in www.facebook.com, until the time na ma-receive nato ang atong ang home screen sa atong browsers, we'll talk about the processes involved. What are the processes involved? Okay, so to start with, let's discuss the process of how the web works can be summarized into a series of interactions between three different systems. Okay, basically, again, the web works, it can be summarized into a series of interaction between three different systems, namely clients, servers, and the domain name system or DNS server. Okay, so every time that we are going to enter a URL, let's say facebook.com, the moment that we entered it and then the moment that we received its homepage is an interaction between these three systems. We have clients, servers, and domain name system server. So let's try to discuss each of them. Clients are the devices and software that request and render web content. This includes web browsers, online games, music and video streaming applications, online shopping applications, and many more. Okay, so again, web browsers. What are the web browsers that you know?
Google Chrome, sir.
Okay, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox. Okay, so the usual ng mga web browsers. Maybe the web browsers are perhaps one of the main example of a client. Okay, and then online games. Let's say Mobile Legends, Call of Duty Mobile, PUBG. All right. So these are called clients. Basically, the devices or software that request and render web contents. So, ug unsa mga device or unsa mga application that we use that will connect to the internet, kumbaga, to connect to the web server or web that will display web contents, that is called clients. Another example is Shopee, Lazada, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook. Okay, so these are called clients. Basically, these applications request and render web contents. Diba? For example, sa Lazada or Zalora, ganahan ka mo palit og Nike shoes. Okay, so you just have to search for it. So that is a request. Until na pag-search nimo, na-receive nimo tong mga list of Nike shoes nga imong nga options, then meaning it rendered the web content that you requested. So we have request and render. So you request for the items that you wanted to find, and then the application render the content that the server gave you. Okay, so that is client. Servers are applications that deliver web contents or services to the client. Okay, so going back with Zalora. So whenever we search for, let's say, Nike, okay, so the Zalora will send a request to the server, the Zalora server, to find for the items that to find Nike items, diba? And then when the server completed the task, it will send back to the Zalora app, diba? And then the Zalora app will render the content on the screen. So again, the client, which is Zalora, will send the request, again, for example, katong Nike shoes, and then the server will search for Nike shoes and then send it back to the client, and then the client will render it to the screen para makita nimo ang mga Nike shoes nga gina-offer. Diba? Nagets ra niyo ang scenario?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the domain name system or the DNS server is a hierarchical naming system for network devices. It serves as a phone book of the internet. But instead of phone number, it uses IP or internet protocol addresses. Okay, so the domain name system is like a phone book now. So for example, let's try to compare it whenever we try to call someone. Okay? So, natay phone book, di ba? Uso pa ba ninyo ang manawag ron og using phones? Katong na mga mobile numbers?
Yes, sir.
Uso pa gyapon sa. Okay, so sometimes if we don't know the number, dili man nato may memorize gyud unless if that person serves kani kana dako siya deal sa imong kinabuhi, alright? If importante kayo mo ang tao, then that's the time that you're going to memorize it, if ever ganahan ka. But not all the time we were going to memorize numbers. Imagine that's 11 digits, and then for example, na kay 10 friends, may memorize na mo 10 10 phone numbers, diba? So that's why we have phone books. That way, we're just going to save it on the phone book, and then we're just going to find the person nga nakasave sa atong phone book and then call. Alright? So the domain name system is also the same thing. So each website has its own address, has its own IP address. Okay, for example, ang facebook.com, na siya kagalingon niya yung IP address. And for us to visit facebook.com, we need to get its the browser needs to get the IP address para matultulan niya ang facebook.com. Same thing with calling somebody, we need to get the phone number that we're trying to call for the call to go through. So basically, ang website na po siya ilang kaugalingon nga murag phone number, but it's not called phone number, it is called IP address. So again, facebook.com has its own IP address, and since kita mga tao, we have very limited storage ang atong utok, it's not very practical if instead of web address, for example, ganata mo visit Facebook, instead nga magbutang ta og IP address every time sa atong browser, we just going to call Facebook, and then ang DNS server will try to find it. Okay? Because again, it's impractical if we are going to constantly put IP addresses for each web page. Diba? Dili maglisod tag memorize sa mga IP addresses sa mga web page. That is why the domain name system server is invented. So every time that a web or all the websites will be registered in the domain name system, ang ilang IP addresses, i-register the domain name system, and then every time that we are going to search for, let's say, facebook.com, our browser will go to the domain name system, or will send a request to the domain name system to get the IP address of that website so that matultulan niya ang website nga atong gina-open. Okay? Nagets na yung idea sa domain name system? It's like phone book, but instead of phone numbers, it uses IP addresses. Nagets ra?
Okay,
Sir.
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, you have to think that each website has its own IP address. Murabag, each phone, dapat na siya yung kagalingon ng phone number, or each SIM card rather, has its own phone number. Same thing with websites, it has its own IP address. And for us, human, to visit that website, di ba, dili maayo pag atong ibutang ang IP address. Dili siya effective, dili siya practical nga paagi nga atong ibutang ang IP address. So instead, the domain name system is used so that the IP address is already saved in the domain name system. The aturang buhaton is to enter the name or the domain name or the address of the website, and then si domain name system na bahala sa IP address, and then it will be provided back to the client so that the client will be able to locate the website. Okay, so that is the domain name system. So we have here, again, we have the client, we have the server, and now we have the domain name system server. Okay, so going back to the clients, here are some examples of web clients. So we have a PC or tablet or laptop, mobile phones, and then we have here web browsers, we have online games, we have shopping and streaming apps. So these are called clients. All right, so here, this is an illustration on how the web works. So we have here, going back, how the web works can be summarized into the series of interaction between the three systems. So we have client, we have IP address, and we have the web server. Okay, so let's try to understand the illustration. So again, the moment that you enter the URL, by the way, the URL stands for Unified Resource Locator, or URL as a web resource that specifies the location of a website. It is like the address, the web address. Kumaga. So for example, we want to visit www.facebook.com. So the moment that we use our client, let's say browser, Google Chrome, we enter www.facebook.com. Sa ago ba dyan ako mouse? Okay. An HTTP request will be initiated. Okay, and then the HTTP request will be sent to the DNS server, kani? to get the IP address. So, unsaon pag-travel sa HTTP request to the DNS, it travels through the internet. Okay? So again, the HTTP request will travel to the DNS server to get the IP address using the internet. Okay? So once the HTTP request, if the DNS server rather, makita na sa DNS server ang IP address, then it will be used to locate the host web server. Okay. So again, the IP address belongs to the web server, and whenever the HTTP request finds the IP address, it will be used to locate the web server. Okay? And then the web server will process the request. For example, ang gi-request kay www.facebook.com. So, iyahang kolekon ang homepage sa facebook.com, and it will be sent back. Okay? The web content is sent back to the browser in HTML form through the internet. So once the web content is already processed by the web browsers, the web server will send the content back to the client, in this case the browser, through the internet, and it will be transformed into HTML. Okay, again, the request will be made first from the client. Once it's made, the HTTP request will travel through internet to the DNS server to locate the IP address, or to get the IP address, and then the IP address will be used to locate the web host server, and then the server will process the web content and send it back to the client. That's why sometimes it will take a little while, take a few seconds for us to get the kuan. For example, we visit at www.facebook.com. So, for example, let's try it. Okay. The moment that we enter www.facebook.com, it may take maybe a few seconds depending on the internet connectivity, internet speed, because the first thing that it's gonna do is the HTTP request will go to the DNS server to get the IP address for Facebook, and then once the DNS server has already provided the IP address, it will be used to locate the server itself, and then once the server is located, the server will process the request and send it back to the URL in HTML form. That means ang isend nga content sa web browser are just codes. Alright? And then once ang code na receive na sa browser, that's the time that the browser will render it and display the web page on your screen. Okay? Do you have any questions about that? Any clarifications?
Wala ra, sir.
Naklaro ba to?
Yes, sir.
Anyway, this is just an overview. Of course, dagan pa mga processes involved. Giyon sa pag-send ang request sa browser, dagan pang processes involved. Giyon sa pag-locate ang IP address sa DNS server. Napa po yung mga processes involved on how the web server process the web content and send it back to the client. So there are a lot more processes going on for each system. But this is just an overview. Kumbaga, overview lang siya o giyon sa pag-work ang web, ang World Wide Web. So again, for example, okay, so we are going to visit NORSU website. Okay, so we enter norsu.edu.ph sa atong browser. Okay, so pag-click na to enter, an HTTP request will be made, alright, through the internet. It will travel to the DNS server to get the IP address. So the IP address for NORSU is 103.68.157.2, or at least this is the IP address sa NORSU website two semesters ago. So I'm not sure if this is still the same IP address. We'll check it later on. But if this is the IP address, once the DNS server provided the IP address will be used to locate the web server. So, once malocate na ang web server that contains this IP address, the web server will process the request. The request is to get to the website, so the web server will collect the web content for norsu.edu.ph in HTML form, and then it will send the content through the internet back to the client. Okay? And then once the codes, the HTML codes, is already being sent back to the client, which is the browser, will render the codes or the HTML codes, and then convert it into graphics and display it on the screen. Okay? So again, going back, the moment that we enter the website, it will travel through the internet to the DNS server to get the IP address. Okay, the reason why we need to get the IP address is for us to locate the web server. So this is the IP address for the web server. So once it's located, the web server will process the request, will collect the web contents, and send it back to the client. And then the client will render it through the screen. So remember that all of these travels through the internet. Okay? So na mo yung mga question ana, what you should unsa may mga common nga scenario nga you may experience when you're trying to visit a website? Unsa mga common scenarios or problems or issues?
Sometimes, sir, may mga error.
Unsa man mga error usually? Okay, here's the thing. Although we are going to talk about it in our next lesson, but this is another overview. So sometimes makabantay mo moingon nga DNS error. Kabantay mo ana sa inyong browser?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So when you say,
Sir.
okay, whenever it says DNS error, that means either ang inyong website nga gi-enter is not wala siya IP address nga makit-an. So the reason for that is maybe because na broken ang connection between your client and DNS. So it could be that, or most common nga problem is that ang website nga imong gi-enter wala siya exist, meaning wala siya iyahang IP address. That's why the DNS server cannot find the IP address for your website. So for example, normal na siyang mahitabo if nasa kag input sa web address. So for example, imbes nga google.com nga double O nahimuran GOGLE. Okay? So sometimes it may cause a DNS server error. It's because dili man malocate sa DNS, di man siya kalocate og website that says GOGLE. Inana ba? Okay? So that is just one of example why you'll get an error message saying DNS server error. Okay? So mo nang ginabuhat sa uban nga mga dagkong websites, butangan taga nila daghan nga website name ang Facebook, ang ilahang website. For example, Facebook. So you can go to Facebook using fb.com. You can still visit Facebook bisag facebook.co, walay M ang imong com, mabisit ra gyapon nimo because they implemented nga to give chance to other people nga masayop sila enter, at least mo route ra gyapon siya sa Facebook. But anyway,
Tapos, kon.
man.
Okay.
All right. So that will be another discussion, a whole new discussion in our future lessons. So do you have any questions, guys, regarding our lessons for today?
None, sir.
Sure.
Nice.
Okay. That's the case. Please be ready for the assessment. I'm going to give it to you later on, and then the assignment as well. As for the sections A, I'm going to meet them tomorrow to continue with the discussion. And then on our next lesson, we are going to discuss in further details on how client works, how the DNS server works, how the web servers work. In that way, we'll get the concrete idea on how the web works. For now, this is just an overview. So again, this will be continued on our next lesson. So next week, Tuesday, hopefully, I'll inform you if madayon ang class or not. And then to assess your learning from today's lesson, please copy this link. I'm going to send it later on. The deadline will be Tuesday, September 28, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. It's Tuesday. And then for your assignment, I'm going to upload this to Google Classroom, but here it is. So in your own words, okay, meaning inyong kaugalingon nga explanation, discuss your thoughts briefly to support the following facts about the World Wide Web. So basically, you're going to explain briefly lang, why is it that dynamic websites are preferred more by many businesses or organizations? Number 2, why is it that web browsers cannot render server-side scripting languages like PHP? And then the internet can be compared to the highway connecting cities and town. And then why is it that domain name system or DNS server is like a phone book for the web? And then why is it that static websites are cheaper to build but more expensive to maintain compared to dynamic websites? So you're going to discuss it briefly lang. Bisag one sentence lang a discussion. Don't really care. And by the way, take your time because I'm really going to read each item. Basig kaingon mo nga din nabasahon sa kadagkan nato. No, I'm going to find the time ako dyan nabasahon. Basahon ako ni. Usually this is the same assignment that I've given last semester. I read all of it. But medyo nagmahay ko kay kapoy ba kay basa ni. But I will give it a go this time. So again, that will be your assignment. Stand by. I'm going to upload it on our Google Classroom later on. So again, do you have any questions before we end? Clarification. Okay.
Wala ra, sir.
All right.
None,
Again.
sir.
Okay. If that's the case, can we turn on your cameras? Para makita. Dali lang. Okay, let's wait for everybody else.
Sir, wala ko yung camera, sir.
It's okay. Katong na lang. Lato na ito na iban. Naka-off pala gini uban. Okay, ready? Sige. Ready? 3, 2, 1, smile. Okay. Alright, thank you so much for coming, guys, and I'll see you now in next class. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Sir, bye, sir.
Hapyod. Ano, Squid Game?
Ay, sir, by the way, sir, katong sad.
Live na sir guys. Ano pa rin sir guys?
Pili abang si mong resort by.
Kontak lagi. Ay, hindi mo. Ding! Ding! Patay juga mo. Si Jis ah. Ay, mga on guys. Nangaon na. Sana awaw. Ngaon. Ano yun? Ano yun? Ay. Happy ba? Guys! Yung ganahan Jen na dito guys. Pato nga kaupan dito guys.
Si G. Priso si G. G, alin diri G.
Namis bilibin. Sulong siya.